About anxiety, fate, death, and all the proclivity. Stand alone and look up at the passing clouds, or stare at the night sky reveal further aspects of its celestial immensity. Gaze at the breaking waves on a beach that repeat for eternity. Nature is infinite in its experience and continuity, that nests all the beings which live and eventually die. We are not only anxiously aware of our finitude, our limits to experience life, but also aware at a subconscious level as to what it is. The realization of such finitude also reveals our shared anxieties. Such eternal anxieties, evolving through time, that have influenced not only mythology, religion, spirituality, but also philosophy, politics, art, and culture. Hello darkness, my old friend. The sound of silence, Simon and Garfunkel. As a species, we have evolved tremendously in terms of ability to survive, build better techniques and technology, albeit the question of finitude remained as is. Never decoupled from our desires of infinite growth, power, proliferation, and modernity. Anxieties continue to accelerate over time, looking at an otherwise meaningless temporal universe, or within a hyper-accelerated society. We are aware of the shared anxieties that have beset our world currently. Anxiety in the form of dread and doom, renewed speculation or resolution, be it based around the environment or population or possibility of nuclear annihilation, extreme climate events, pollution, ongoing war, genocide, exodus, economic collapse, pandemics, etc., together as the anxiety of fate and death. But is that something new? The existential dread and questions that accompanied primordial human beings followed the medieval seafaring explorers and also gun-wielding conquerors, right down to us all, situated within current techno-industrial achievement society. But this anxiety cannot be eliminated, cannot be just classified as a problem. As theologians over ages have concurred, its validity as something that is paired to existence itself. Best understood as the subconscious awareness of finality, Paul Tillich, and consequently the most avoidable question of our times. Humanity as a non-being in the future? Too much anxiety? Or too much resilience? Or just too many contradictory remedies, theories, conspiracies, pills, and policies? Either way, one has to deal with anxiety. A deal, or say 3 coherent definitions of anxiety with a capital A, and our embodied relationship with it. We tend to interchange fear, dread, and anxiety as the same thing. Yet anxiety merits an explanation. Fear being symbolic of an object that can be faced and attacked, endured, or conquered. Yet anxiety is not a commonly agreeable object, and as an individual or group we feel impotent and disempowered. 99% of us prefer to move away, as far as possible, from facing the threat of non-being. What is a non-being? Simply put, true nothingness. That said, I do apologize to all who believe in the imaginary systems of rebirth and regeneration of life forever. For eons, in mystical ways, we human beings have anticipated our shared future as the eventual non-being. And at the same time, we are aware of the infinite passage of time, or as some folks prefer to call it, an eternity of eternities. When we look back at the past, including our own lives, we know well that what was alive once upon a time is now suspended in the past, including all who we knew as human beings. According to theologian and writer Tad DeLay, anxiety has ontic roots that played a key role in the proliferation of the earliest human beings. Since prehistoric times, shared needs and concerns based on safety, shelter, food, and group security were backed by survival skills, coping mechanisms, as well as common anxieties. An ontic process by which shared beliefs must make us feel less anxious and more safe, cohesive, and meaningful. Our ability to relate as individuals or as members of a tribe about what is real as opposed to what is a phenomenal existence. The fear of death is one such obvious form of anxiety, which is common between non-human and human entities. Yet beyond that commonality, human beings can direct the element of anxiety in every new fear, Tad DeLay. Fear that can be real or imaginary, from the past, present, or future, as material or as spiritual. Similar dynamics are at play within modern rituals of shared anxieties. Early human beings, much like us, wish to attain a status or site from which all natural and ecological anxieties might disappear. Early human beings ask the same question again and again. Am I going to live or die today? For most of you reading this story, that question is not such a real concern as of now, as it might have been thousands of years ago, staring into the infinity of nature and the universe above. That said, people in Gaza are freezing to death as of now, or fighting disease and starvation, fraught with the same primordial anxiety, while facing an unpredictable fate. Barefoot and hungry, they appear from every part of the walled city, the abandoned children of Jerusalem. William of Tyre, 1186 CE. In his book Dynamics of Faith, written in 1956, Paul Tillich makes a compelling argument about the connection between group thinking, anxiety, and morals. He explains that all three share a common heritage. According to Tillich, many of our medieval experiences and beliefs are also situated within the framework of anxiety, found not just within religious cults and spiritual debates, but also commonly understood by human beings as part of the phenomenal existence. Take the example of the bubonic plagues, Black Death, that ravaged 14th and 15th century Europe. The death toll of the plague remains unclear, yet generally agreed as a figure between 40 to 60% of then existing population of Europe, the Levant, and North Africa. Diverse types of group thinking captured the deepest anxieties of common people and directed their corresponding practices. While some preferred good old isolation, social distancing, or just escaped the sights of death and infection, others opted for what group thinking offered. From magic rituals to animal sacrifice to bloodletting to even burning Jews alive to vinegar baths to chopped raw onions placed on the buboes, the large pus-filled boils that turned black, hence the name Black Death. Rituals to battle the miasma that were documented by Boccaccio, the Decameron, Francis Petrarch, Geoffrey Chaucer, the Canterbury Tales, and William Langland, Piers Plowman, to name a few. Alas, none of the group thinking managed to save the millions who perished for the lack of preventive actions, right interventions, sanitation, and availability of medicines. As horrendous or disastrous is the power of group thinking in modern times, and it takes a cult figure to exploit that aspect of a given society, in times of political instability or worse, incoming death and pandemic, is why millions of Indians reacted positively to Prime Minister Narendra Modi's nationwide call to proudly beat pots and pans at 9 p.m. sharp. Why? In order to evade the incoming COVID-19 pandemic. In a televised speech watched by more than 400 million Indians in late March 2020, facing the inevitability of lockdown, albeit Modi managed to convince a shocking proportion of the population to carry on with the national clangfest for days on. Not convinced? Well, try the new cow piss Gaumutra, offered by Suman Haripriya, an elected member of the parliament. Without the real threat of plague and death, such anxiety, collective psychosis, and consequent behavior would have no foothold, not the least within a sane and secure society. Regardless, the Omicron wave 2021 ravaged through India, dealing a devastating blow, not only on the public health infrastructure, but entire sections of society. The unofficial death count hovering between 1.7 to 2 million, labeled as excess death. No amount of social distancing, beating pots and pans, or drinking cow piss could protect this society of affirmation, bound in superstition and as much anxiety. Is so obvious that symbols, products, or rituals also bind us into group cohesion and shared hysteria. Or back then, if you were situated in the US and the corresponding group think was to drink hydroxychloroquine. Must include the Arabian antidote of drinking camel urine advocated in Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Qatar. Or worse, as some techies suggested, exposing yourself to radiation to kill the virus entirely. Remarkable are the words of Paul Tillich in this context, when he said fate would not produce inescapable anxiety and even insanity without death behind it. There are thousands of interventions, techniques, therapies, and hacks to reduce anxiety. Common questions like, do I have meaning? Or is life ultimately meaningless? Is there something more grounded? Will I ever escape my history? Will I be recognized for who I am? All such spiritual inquest can also be understood as a conflict between our self-awareness, our understanding of finitude, versus a range of modern anxieties. We are alienated by the signifiers that are handed down to us by the world. A phenomenal existence, widely felt by people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s across the world. As much as the fact that so many younger people opt for psychotherapy, counseling, mindfulness, or magic thinking as means to overcome their given anxieties. Regardless of age and background, almost everything that could be done earlier in reality can now be simulated online as an extension of practices framed by our shared anxieties. What follows, traveling back in time, like a serpent in circular motion, is the spiritual path of anxiety. is why the world is witnessing so much spiritual activity and speculation to address common anxiety. We can feel such spiritual anxiety is two ways broadly. One is experienced relatively, in the moment of feeling meaningless. Two, experienced absolutely, when we are convinced or conclude that our existence is meaningless. There is no doubt about millions of people situated in different nations, suffering from a range of anxiety disorders. While doctors and specialists insist on external conditions or past events as the cause of such disorders, they remain almost entirely clueless about the awareness of the future, non-being, and the uncharted territories of our subconscious and its separation from the modern world. Who feel a separation from the world because of a fundamental constitutive lack of being for any number of reasons centered upon personal loss, social disintegration, or even the environment, population, race, ethno-nationalism. Over time, these convictions and ideas can evolve into self-imposed injunctions. Tad delay, ritual, repression, and forms of anxiety. To understand self-imposed injunctions, one can look at a society of mass anxiety that is also subject to frequent mass shootings. The eventual resignation of reality in favor of violent, abrupt salvation. No less than 60 active shooter incidents occurred in high schools alone in the U.S. during 2021 to 22. A total of 385 mass shootings in 2024. Is not an ethical act, in which man affirms his anxiety in spite of those elements of his existence which conflict with his essential self-affirmation. Paul Tillich, Courage to Be. For all that Tillich meant, in hindsight the same self-imposed affirmation can turn totally violent, manifesting as a mass shooting or a call to cleanse society of the Untermensch. But almost every mass shooter in America is as educated, and sometimes as concerned by the ruined prospects of his society, his environment, and quality of life. Terror can also impose itself via group thinking. One such example from the past were the Stalin-era anti-sedition laws, aimed at the entire citizenry of the USSR. Thousands of cases of sedition, blasphemy, anti-communist espionage, whereby if the accused protested, insisted their innocence, they were more likely to be condemned, even more deserving to be executed or imprisoned for life. This miasma of judgment and communist groupthink that existed for over 50 years, 1920 to mid-1970, was documented in horrific detail by Alexander Solzhenitsyn in his investigative archives spanning 24 years of imprisonment and forced labor, titled The Gulag Archipelago. In this horrible flux of anxiety, guilt and condemnation on everyone, whether one is religious or not, faces the same final necessity, with her slash himself. What are we supposed to become? During this finite span and form of being, is perhaps why all us educated people have an ideal project, and we are faced with guilt and condemnation when we fail to live up to our ideals or the existing group thinking of the tribe we belong to. A bizarre or profoundly stupid ambiguity between good and evil permeates everything we do, and many times that can drive oneself either towards complete self-rejection or total self-conviction. Pathways entirely detached from common material reality. The presence of anxiety and the possibility of non-being literally runs its course through a range of organizations dedicated to the salvation of our lost unity, or the heartbroken planet. Even the most progressive doomers who address planetary anxiety end up endorsing products and symbols of salvation, pathways that do not address the actual basis of future dread and anxiety. But there are those who dare to reject past affirmations, or as Eric Fromm said, escapes from his freedom. As an example, Deep Adaptation by Jem Bendell is a great story about the transition of an individual from states of repressed anxiety towards fulfillment, all the while accepting his finitude and even incoming collapse. But we cannot just equate repression alone to anxiety. Just for the moment maybe, but not forever. As an axiom, religious behavior and continuous reinforcement is necessary for repression to function properly. Repression is a response to anxiety and not the other way around. It is only then religion equates to the return of the repressed. Paul Tillich, Courage to Be. By religion, one does not have to limit the focus on the ancient or traditional ones, but also include groups which are neo-spiritual, philosophical, political, social, cultural, medical, environmental, technological, etc., is what millions of reformers and expert solution providers across the world wish for. Anxious little creatures, out to save the world. Whatever organization, the anxieties be distinguished as real, imaginary, and symbolic. the reality made of great many things happening every day, far or close, social or personal. The imaginary being the conscious part of ourselves, me, the ego, my identity. The image of a constantly refreshed worldview. The symbolic refers to the meanings we derive simultaneously from the real and the imaginary. But a great amount space or experience or background data exists between all three. Call it intersectionality, an unfathomable void, full of dynamic or temporal signifiers, many times captured by anxiety, that can warp our opinions, judgment, and decisions. The danger with this form of anxiety-based reform is that it becomes its own remedy. A strong faith in God or anything of ultimate meaning cannot be produced intentionally, and the attempt only deepens the set of anxieties. Paul Tillich, Courage to Be. What follows as practice is either based on unshakable faith or fanatical self-assertiveness. Anxiety explodes again and again into the open, producing what Eric Fromm called the extreme situations of moral despair that no one can resolve. Our eternal fear of the non-being is eventually delivered by the anxiety of fate and death. It not only threatens a person's whole being, but also one's spiritual balance. But what spiritual balance within a burnout society? Is it not better than to exist creatively in as many spheres of temporality and with as many meanings? The ultimate concern might as well remain unresolved and open to new interpretation as to what one's life as a whole means. Written by the Counterintuitive. audiopervert.substack.com. In case you wish to pledge support with a paid subscription, click here.